William, do you remember your very first meeting at a new job?
Oh, I remember it too well, Sarah. I barely said a single word the whole hour.
Really? Why is that?
I had so many ideas in my head, but every time I opened my mouth, I second-guessed myself and just stayed quiet instead.
That's actually more common than people think. I hear this story from so many listeners, too.
And the worst part is, at the end of the meeting, someone said almost the exact idea I had and everyone loved it.
That's such a familiar feeling, knowing you had something valuable to say, but the words just wouldn't come out.
Exactly. And it took me years to finally feel comfortable speaking up in front of colleagues and managers.
Well, that's exactly what today's episode is all about. Welcome back to English Flow Podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm William, and today we're talking about how to speak confidently at the office.
Whether it's a meeting, a presentation, a simple hallway conversation, or even sharing your opinion with your boss, this episode is for you.
We'll talk about why confidence feels so hard at work, the biggest mistakes people make, and simple techniques you can start using today.
So, if you've ever stayed quiet in a meeting, even when you had something important to say, keep listening.
Let's get started.
William, why do you think so many people struggle with speaking confidently at the office?
I think it comes down to one big fear, the fear of being judged by other people.
That's so true. We worry about saying the wrong thing, sounding unprepared, or being seen as less capable.
Right, and the workplace can feel especially risky because your reputation and your career feel connected to every word you say.
There's also something called the spotlight effect, where we believe people are paying much more attention to us than they actually are.
Oh, I know that feeling well. You think everyone noticed your small mistake, but honestly, most people already moved on.
Exactly. Most colleagues are too busy thinking about their own presentation to remember every detail of yours.
That's actually a relieving thought.
Another reason confidence feels hard is comparison, especially when you're in a room with senior colleagues or people who seem naturally confident.
It's easy to forget that confidence is often built, not something people are simply born with.
Exactly. Even the most confident speaker you know was probably nervous the very first time they spoke up too.
That's such an important reminder.
So the good news is, if confidence can be learned, that means you can build it too, step by step.
Let's talk about some common mistakes people make that quietly damage their confidence at work.
William, what's one mistake you see often when it comes to speaking up at the office?
I think the biggest one is over-apologizing before you even say your idea.
Oh, like saying, sorry, this might be a silly question, but...
Exactly, and that small sentence quietly tells everyone to expect something weak before you've even spoken.
That's such a good point. Your words shape how people perceive you even before the actual message.
Another common mistake is speaking too fast, especially when you're nervous.
Right, and speaking fast can make you sound rushed or unsure, even if your idea is actually excellent.
A third mistake is ending every sentence like a question, even when you're not actually asking one.
You mean like saying, I think we should launch next month? Instead of, I think we should launch next month.
Exactly. That small rise in your tone can make a confident statement sound uncertain.
Another mistake is waiting for the perfect moment to speak, and by the time you're ready, the conversation has already moved on.
That happens so often in fast-paced meetings.
And one more big mistake, staying completely silent, because silence is often mistaken for having nothing valuable to offer.
Even though the real reason is usually fear, not a lack of ideas.
Exactly. And once you recognize these patterns, you can slowly start replacing them with more confident habits.
Let's talk about what confidence actually looks like at work.
William, I think a lot of people imagine confidence as being the loudest person in the room.
That's such a common misunderstanding. Real confidence is actually much quieter than people expect.
So, what does real confidence look like then?
It looks like speaking clearly, pausing when needed, and not rushing to fill every silence.
I love that. Confidence isn't about talking the most, it's about trusting what you say.
Exactly. Confident people are comfortable with short pauses because they're not afraid of silence.
That's interesting because many nervous speakers try to fill every gap with filler words like or like.
Right, and simply allowing a short pause instead can instantly make you sound more composed.
Confidence also looks like maintaining steady eye contact or a calm, steady tone, even when your heart is racing inside.
So you don't have to feel completely confident. You just need to act calm and steady on the outside.
Exactly. And here's something powerful. Confidence isn't the absence of nervousness, it's speaking anyway, despite the nervousness.
That's such an encouraging way to look at it.
So, confidence is a skill you practice, not a personality trait you either have or don't have.
Now, let's get into some practical techniques our listeners can start using right away.
William, what's one technique that personally helped you the most?
Honestly, it was preparing just one strong sentence before every meeting, so I always had something ready to say.
That's such a simple but powerful trick. You don't need to prepare everything, just one solid point.
Exactly, and once I said that one sentence, the fear of speaking up again became so much smaller.
Another great technique is slowing down your speech, especially at the beginning of your sentence.
Right, speaking slightly slower instantly makes you sound calmer and more in control.
A third technique is using pauses on purpose instead of filling silence with or
So instead of rushing to the next word, you simply take a breath and let the pause do the work.
Exactly, and another powerful habit is finishing your sentence with a full stop tone instead of letting your voice rise like a question.
That small change alone can make your ideas sound so much more certain.
Another technique is starting with a clear statement instead of a soft opener like, "This might be a bad idea, but..."
Right, you could simply say, "Here's an idea," and go straight into your point.
Body language matters too. Sitting up straight and keeping your shoulders relaxed can actually change how confident you feel inside.
That's fascinating. So your posture doesn't just show confidence, it can actually create it.
Exactly. And one final tip, practice speaking out loud alone, even just repeating your ideas to yourself before a meeting.
That builds familiarity, so the words feel natural when you finally say them to others.
These are small techniques, but together they create a noticeable shift in how confident you sound.
Now, let's talk about a specific and very common situation, speaking up in meetings.
William, meetings are probably one of the hardest places for people to speak confidently, right?
Definitely, especially in a room full of senior colleagues or people you don't know well.
So, what's a simple way to start speaking up more in meetings?
I always recommend speaking early, even if it's just a short comment, because it's much harder to speak after staying silent for 30 minutes.
That's such a great point. The longer you wait, the bigger speaking up starts to feel in your mind.
Exactly. So even something small, like agreeing with a point and adding one detail, can be a great way to start.
What if someone has an idea, but they're worried it's not good enough to share?
I always say share it as a question instead. Like, what if we tried this approach? Would that work?
That's clever because it invites discussion without the pressure of being completely certain.
Exactly. And often, half-formed ideas actually lead to the best group discussions.
What about when someone interrupts you while you're speaking?
A simple, calm phrase works well. Something like, "Let me just finish this point, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts."
That sounds respectful, but still firm and confident at the same time.
Exactly. Confidence isn't about being aggressive. It's about calmly holding your space in the conversation.
I think that's such an important distinction for our listeners.
Now, let's hear a story about someone who transformed the way she speaks at work.
So, there was a woman named Leia who joined a new company, and for months she barely spoke in meetings.
I feel like a lot of our listeners will relate to her already.
She had great ideas, but every time she wanted to speak, her heart would race and she would simply stay quiet instead.
That internal battle is so exhausting, wanting to speak but freezing at the last moment.
One day, her manager asked her directly, "Leia, what do you think about this plan?"
Oh, that must have felt like a big moment.
It was, and instead of giving a short, unsure answer, she took a breath and simply said what she actually believed.
How did that feel for her afterward?
She said it felt like a small victory, and to her surprise, her manager actually thanked her for the honest feedback.
That must have completely changed her confidence going forward.
It did. She started preparing one small comment before every meeting after that, just like we talked about earlier.
So she used that exact technique of preparing one solid point in advance.
Exactly. And slowly, speaking up stopped feeling terrifying and started feeling normal, even natural.
That's such an inspiring shift.
A year later, she was leading her own meetings, and she once told me, I didn't need to become a different person, I just needed to practice being heard.
That's such a powerful way to end her story.
Her journey shows us that confidence at work isn't about dramatic change, it's about small, repeated moments of courage.
I think everyone listening can take something from Leah's story today.
Now let's talk about how to handle one more challenging situation, disagreeing with someone confidently.
Yes, that's such a valuable skill.
William, a lot of people struggle with disagreeing at work because they're afraid of sounding rude or causing conflict.
That's true, but staying silent when you disagree can also cause problems, especially if you have valuable input.
So how can someone disagree while still sounding respectful and professional?
A simple method is acknowledging the other person's point first before sharing your own perspective.
So something like, I understand your point, and I'd like to add a different perspective.
Exactly. That phrase shows respect while still allowing you to share your honest opinion.
What about when you're really unsure if your opinion is correct?
You could simply say, I might be missing something, but here's how I see it, which keeps the conversation open and confident at the same time.
I love that. It shows humility without diminishing the value of your idea.
Exactly. Confidence and humility can absolutely exist together in the same sentence.
I think that combination is what makes someone truly respected at work, not just loud, but thoughtful.
Completely agree. And that respect often grows naturally over time, the more you practice speaking honestly.
Now, let's talk about something we all face eventually, handling tough questions and criticism with confidence.
Yes, this one is so important too.
William, what's the most common reaction people have when they get an unexpected or difficult question at work?
I think most people panic a little and feel like they need to answer instantly, even if they're not fully ready.
That's such a common trap, but honestly, it's completely okay to pause before answering a tough question.
Right, taking a breath and saying, that's a great question, let me think for a moment, actually sounds confident, not weak.
I love that phrase. It buys you time while still keeping you in control of the conversation.
What if someone genuinely doesn't know the answer to a question they're asked?
In that case, it's perfectly fine to say, I don't have that answer right now, but I'll follow up with you shortly.
That's so much better than guessing or rambling just to fill the silence.
Exactly. Confident people aren't afraid to admit what they don't know because honesty actually builds more trust than pretending.
What about receiving criticism? How can someone respond to that with confidence?
A simple approach is thanking the person first before responding. Something like, thank you for the feedback. Let me think about that.
That small pause helps you respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally in the moment.
Exactly. And remember, receiving feedback doesn't mean you did something wrong. It often just means there's room to grow.
That mindset shift alone can make criticism feel so much less threatening.
Right. Confident people see feedback as useful information, not as a personal attack on who they are.
I think that's such a healthy way to approach it.
One more helpful phrase for tough moments is simply saying, can you give me an example so I can understand your point better?
That shows genuine openness while still giving you time to process the conversation calmly.
Exactly. And with practice, these small phrases become second nature, and tough moments start to feel much more manageable.
Now, let's talk about a situation that happens every single day, small talk at the office.
William, do you think small talk is actually connected to confidence at work?
Definitely, because small talk is often the very first impression people have on you before any big presentation or meeting.
That's so true, and for many people, small talk actually feels harder than formal speaking situations.
Right, because there's no clear topic and it can feel unpredictable compared to a structured meeting.
So, what's a simple way to feel more confident during casual office conversations?
I always recommend having a few easy topics ready, like a recent weekend activity, a show you're watching, or even the weather.
That's such a practical tip. Having something ready removes that awkward blank moment when you don't know what to say.
Exactly, and asking simple follow-up questions also keeps the conversation flowing naturally without needing to carry it alone.
Something like, how was your weekend? And then simply listening and responding to what they share.
Right, small talk isn't about being the most interesting person, it's about being genuinely present in the conversation.
I love that because it takes so much pressure off. You don't need clever jokes, you just need genuine curiosity.
Exactly, and over time, these small daily conversations actually build stronger relationships with your colleagues.
Which then makes bigger conversations, like meetings or presentations, feel much more comfortable too.
It's interesting how something as small as saying good morning with confidence can shape how people perceive you throughout the day.
Absolutely. Confidence really does show up in the smallest daily moments, not just the big important ones.
Now, let's wrap everything up with a recap of everything we covered today.
Yes, let's bring it all together. All right, everyone, let's quickly recap what we talked about today.
We started by understanding why speaking up at work feels so hard, mostly because of fear and comparison.
We then looked at common mistakes like over-apologizing, speaking too fast, and letting your sentences sound like questions.
We also learned what real confidence actually looks like: calm, steady, and comfortable with silence.
After that, we shared practical techniques like preparing one strong sentence, slowing your speech, and using pauses on purpose.
We talked specifically about speaking up in meetings and how speaking early can make it much easier.
And finally, we heard Leah's story, along with tips on disagreeing confidently and respectfully at work.
We also covered how to handle tough questions and criticism calmly, and how confidence shows up even in everyday small talk.
If there's one thing to remember from today, it's this: confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's speaking anyway. That's such an important message for everyone listening right now.
So here's our challenge for you. In your very next meeting, try preparing just one sentence and say it out loud.
It could be a question, an idea, or simply agreeing with a point and adding your own perspective.
Whatever you choose, remember, every confident speaker started exactly where you are right now.
Well said, William. That's such a powerful note to end on. If this episode helped you today, please like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague or friend who needs a little more confidence at work.
It really helps us grow the English Flow podcast family and reach more people with practical episodes like this one.
Until next time, prepare a little, breathe a little, and speak with the confidence you already deserve.
This has been English Flow Podcast. See you in the next episode.